A strange letter arrived in Reinhard's hands. He was no clairvoyant, so there was no way for him to know. But had Marquis von Lichtenlade, the Minister of State, or Viscount Gerlach, the Minister of Treasury, been present, they might have felt compelled to mention that the letter was identical to the anonymous report they had previously received. The B lady harbors ill will against the G lady at court. Be cautious. There was, of course, no signature. Just that one cryptic sentence. Reinhard stared at the note for a while. Rumors and hearsay should always be sifted through, but what was the intent behind this letter, specifically sent to him? If it were a trap, it should have been more artfully designed to win some trust. It certainly wasn't written out of goodwill, but it could be a calculated warning. It was immediately clear that the G lady referred to Countess Grunwald, his sister Anna Rose. But who was the B lady? If it were Duke Braunschweig's wife, she could hardly be called simply lady. It must be Marquess von Benemunde. Reinhard's voice carried more ominous and unpleasant meaning than even the term witch could convey. After all, this noblewoman had already attempted his life more than once. Those who acted as her tools had all been dealt with, but that was just addressing the symptoms. He had yet to strike back at the source of the disease itself. If we let that woman live, my sister's life will be in danger, as well as my own, he muttered. Reinhard could protect himself, but his current power did not extend deep enough within the palace to shield Anna Rose from harm. That woman was once the sole object of the Kaiser's affection. It's no wonder she wants to harm Lady Anna Rose, Kirchei said, agreeing with Reinhard's assessment. Having shared life and death with Reinhard for the past 9 years, Kirchei was well aware of the Marquess von Benemunde's obsession. But that's where I'm confused. Even if my sister were to fall from grace, it doesn't guarantee the Kaiser would return to favoring that woman, Reinhard said irritably, brushing his golden hair from his forehead. As long as the Kaiser's preferences remain the same and time doesn't reverse itself, there's no path forward for that woman. What a futile thing to do. She is not like you, Lord Reinhard. She has both the time and the means to plot her schemes, and this is likely not a matter of reason or advantage. The Marquess von Benemunde should be just over 30 years old, at an age when one should be at the height of vitality and productivity. She was confined to an empty salon, smoldering in thoughts of decline, jealousy, and defeat, walking slowly toward old age. Kirchei felt something beyond hostility when he thought of such a woman. However, his sympathy paled in comparison to his concern for Anna Rose. As long as the Marquess von Benemunde sought to harm her, Kircheis could easily brush aside any feelings of pity. In any case, what kind of harm is she planning to inflict? Kircheis wondered. Who knows? Poison, maybe? Or she could be trying to drive my sister out of the palace. On the battlefield, Reinhardt's boundless imagination and insight were unrivaled. But when it came to courtly schemes driven by extreme jealousy between women, his abilities only went so far. If the aim was to drive Anna Rose out of the court, it would first require that she fall out of the Kaiser's favor. Could they be planning to make her fall in some way? Perhaps they would frame her for attempting to poison the Kaiser. At this moment, Reinhard did not wish for the Kaiser's death. His desire for Anna Rose to be freed from the Kaiser's grasp coexisted, intertwined like a spiral, with this feeling. The Kaiser was the man who had torn Anna Rose away from him and locked her in a gilded cage, earning Reinhardt's hatred. Yet for now, that same power and favor served as a shield, protecting her from the various plots and acts of violence. Of course, if the Kaiser had never abducted her in the first place, she would never have become a target for unwarranted hatred. Thus, in the end, the Kaiser could never be forgiven. Reinhardt's ultimate goal was to judge the Kaiser with his own hands, once he had amassed enough power and military might to be independent of the Kaiser's control. Until then, the Kaiser would have to live, awaiting the day of his reckoning, which would also mark the end of the Golden Bomb dynasty. As things stood now, Reinhard was only the younger brother of the Kaiser's favored consort and, despite his high military rank, just another officer. But by next year, he would become the head of the esteemed Count Lohengram family and rise to the ranks of the high nobility. He himself would gain political value. Furthermore, if he could secure greater military victories, surpassing even his triumph in the Third Battle of Tiamat, he might be able to muster the power and authority necessary to protect his sister himself. In that sense, the Marquise von Benemund was perceptive. She recognized me as a future threat as early as when I graduated from the military academy. Reinhard mused, with a hint of irony. Nevertheless, if this letter were to be believed, Anna Rose's life was currently in danger within the palace. What the letter also implied was that there were people aware of this plot who did not necessarily support it. However, it would be too optimistic to assume these people were allies. So, what you're saying is that there aren't any allies within the palace, just different types of enemies, Kircheis remarked. Exactly. But in this case, that might actually work in our favor. Wouldn't it be far more dangerous if all the enemies were united? Reinhardt's ice-blue eyes widened slightly, and he smiled, twining his pale fingers into Kircheis's red hair. Kircheis, you are a wise man. Indeed, you're right. If there are many enemies, we can defeat them one by one, or even turn them against each other, just as this letter suggests. If he couldn't destroy all his enemies himself, then he could make them devour each other. That would be a truly meaningful strategy. Reinhard had also heard rumors regarding the Marquis von Benemoon's miscarriage. For his sister's sake, the Marquis von Benemunde, the more immediate threat had to be dealt with. But at this moment, his reach was still limited. The court is like a spider's web. It is no place for my sister. And yet, I have no choice but to entrust her safety to the power of the spider's leader, Reinhard said, with a trace of bitterness. The palace was not the right place for Anna Rosa. But then, where was? When Reinhard considered this, he realized that in his mind, the ideal time and place was 9 years ago, when his family had moved next door to Kircheis's house. Kircheis had no objection to this thought either. However, there was a vision the two of them both realized, but found difficult to confront. If Anna Rosa had not been taken by the Kaiser, and had instead nurtured a love with an ordinary man, would Reinhard or Kircheis have been able to accept it? Once they recognized this, both men had initially been struck dumb, then found themselves utterly unsure of where to place their emotions and reasoning. It was almost unbearable to even consider that the Kaiser, who had forcibly taken Anna Rosa, might have, in some twisted way, saved them. In any case, the darkness surrounding the Nul Sanssouci palace, both above and below ground, was a dense mass of curses and intrigues, woven endlessly over the centuries. This darkness had been cultivated over nearly 5 centuries of Goldenbaum dynasty rule, nourished by the blood spilled from both body and spirit. Reinhard and Kircheis had never once forgotten their vow. Someday, they would save Anna Rosa from that darkness. End of chapter 2.